Okay, so the first thing we're going to talk about is following your opponent around the ring. Now, when some people want to close the distance on their opponents, for some reason, they just end up following their opponents around the ring in a circle. Now, this is absolutely ridiculous because you're never going to catch up to your opponent. And if they have a great jab, you're going to be on the outside all day long. This is what we saw against Bermane Stiverne and Deontay Wilder, and also what we saw with Devon Alexander and Amir Khan. This is totally ineffective. The second option is running headfirst towards your opponent, and this also doesn't work, especially against skilled opposition. When you're going forward into your opponent, this allows him to escape to either side of you. First and foremost, that is if you're not countered as you're coming in the first place. So if you're not being countered as you're coming in, and as you initially come in, you're still going to give your opponent an escape route on either side of you when you do apply that pressure in a straight line. And typically you're going to also end up smothering your own punches due to your aggression. So this is also highly ineffective, especially against skilled opposition. So the only real option that you have is to cut off the ring. And this involves moving side to side, in other words, making use of lateral movements to cut off the ring and keep your opponent in front of you at all times. So if your opponent goes left, you go left, and if he goes to the right, you go to the right. This is how you cut the ring and apply pressure on an opponent.
So you should see a lot of movement from Taylor.
Customarily, Chavez does not. And Chavez simply hasn't been able to.
What he's trying to do is go to the body, which he's done 2 or 3 times. Hector fighting on nerves right now. He is moving herky-jerky, a little too scared. Skittery is a better word than scared. To Steele, who is a good referee who made a mistake. He's in.
So obviously when you're making a video about cutting off the ring, you have to talk about Julio César Chávez, who was simply a genius at cutting off the ring. Very, very effective at cutting off the ring. And here we see him against Meldrick Taylor. You notice how Taylor begins to move out to his right, which is Chavez's left. Watch how Chavez takes a quick step over to the left to cut off the angle. Right, so you see Chavez simply takes a step over to his left to cut off any possible escape routes for Meldrick Taylor. Now, regardless of which direction Taylor might attempt to actually circle away from, all Chavez has to do is maintain his side-to-side or lateral movement, and he's going to keep Meldrick Taylor in front of him, and he's going to cut the ring off. He's going to keep the angle.
So you should see a lot of movement from Taylor.
Now take note of the distance between the front foot of each of these guys before Meldrick Taylor actually starts to move to the right. And what you're going to notice is Julio César Chávez is going to step that lead foot forward very slightly. So watch that lead foot, how he steps forward. There we see Chavez takes a quick step forward with his lead foot as Taylor begins to move to the right. Now we're going to watch how he steps over to the side. Now you see the angle between, or the distance, between the front foot of both of these guys has actually been reduced. See, by stepping his lead foot forward and then moving laterally over to his left at an angle, Chavez effectively decrements the distance between himself and Meldrick Taylor. And he does so while cutting off the ring. Beautiful. When you make effective use of cutting off the ring, most of the time your opponent is going to end up stepping backwards from you because that's the only option they have. In this case, we just saw Meldrick Taylor use a jab and then step back away from Chavez. This is good for Chavez because Taylor is actually effectively giving up more and more of the ring. This is what you want your opponent to do.
And Chavez simply hasn't been able to.
To Steele, who is a good referee who made a mistake. He's in.
So as Meldrick Taylor circles over to the left, we see Julio César Chávez take quick steps over to his right, making use of side-to-side lateral movement, cutting off the ring, and keeping Meldrick Taylor in front of him at all times. Again, Taylor circling over to the left, Chavez making quick steps over to the right, maintain side-to-side lateral movement, cutting off the ring, keeping Taylor in front of him. Against Hector Camacho, we see the same thing. Camacho is stepping over to his right, Chavez quick steps over to the left, maintaining that side-to-side lateral movement. This builds an incredible amount of mental pressure on his opponent. As Camacho starts to move over to the left, Chavez quick side steps over to the right, cutting off the ring. Beautiful.
That's what he needs to do.
Yep, just what you prescribed before the bell. And Taylor finishing Chavez's shoulders. He has extra. And Taylor finishing. He has extra.
Okay, so in my experience, when I hear people talking about Julio César Chávez, I don't really hear an awful lot about his head movement. Now, Chavez being an intelligent pressure fighter, he knew that having a good defense actually makes him more effective as a pressure fighter. And a guy like Mike Tyson also springs to mind. in terms of having a good defense. Being able to slip punches makes you more effective at cutting off the ring, because when you do cut the ring, you should be expecting something back.
Taylor starting with the jab. Chavez is using more right hand lead.
So here we see Chavez take a quick step over to the left just to keep Taylor in front of him, and then you see him avoid this jab. Of course, when you cut the ring off, you need to be prepared to defend yourself or to punch. And in this case, we see Chavez defend himself, and again he's going to slip a jab. See how he slips this jab to the inside, shoots that left uppercut right up the middle. Taylor does well to avoid the punch. And again, we just take a look at this. Chavez just steps over to his side, slips to the outside. Beautiful defense from Julio César Chávez. Once again, slipping to the inside of a jab as we see here. Shoots the left uppercut down the middle. Now let's pay attention to how Chavez is able to close the distance on Taylor as he steps that lead foot forward. So there you see Julio César Chávez's ability to maintain eye contact with his opponent while he closes the distance using very subtle steps forward with his front foot. Chavez simply uses that front foot to take away the distance inch by inch, often without his opponents actually taking note of his lead foot advancing forward. And this is something that a lot of fighters struggle with, because a lot of them lose coordination between their upper body and their feet. And of course, after he steps that forward, you see he steps again, and then he slips to the inside of this jab. And this is simply what happens when you've drilled the fundamentals over and over and over again. You know, repetition. Chavez simply isn't given enough credit for his head movement. Beautiful slip to the inside, which can be dangerous, but Chavez executes this perfectly, and then shoots that left uppercut. Okay, so now we're going to talk about cutting off the front foot. Fortunately, we're not going to be talking about amputations in this video. We're talking about when you're cutting off the ring, sometimes it's important to actually cut around your opponent's front foot, or to cut off your opponent's front foot. In other words, what we mean is you have to beat your opponent to the step. When your opponent's front foot or his lead foot escapes, usually his whole body is going to follow. If you're able to actually position yourself in such a way where you prevent his front foot from escaping, you can actually trap your opponent more easily.
A lot of angles to Julio César Chávez, and Chavez trying to constantly move to his left, getting out.
So the first thing we see is Pernell is going to pivot on that lead foot, sidestep over to his right. Now we're going to watch how Julio César Chávez is going to accommodate this when he cuts the ring. Notice how Chavez steps his lead foot over to the outside of Pernell's front foot. By doing so, Chavez is able to beat Pernell to the step and therefore prevent Pernell Whitaker from being able to sidestep and pivot out to his right and escape in that angle. Chavez is effectively keeping Pernell Whitaker's lead foot on the inside. Notice that Chavez is defensively responsible and changes levels as he steps his lead foot over to the outside of the southpaw. And this is just good boxing skill from Julio César Chávez. And now watch how Chavez closes the distance this time. Again, he cuts around the front foot of Pernell Whitaker, or he cuts off the front foot, and therefore prevents the escape over to that angle. And of course, Chavez consistently changes levels and remains defensively responsible. Alright, so now we're going to take a look at the different options that Pernell Whitaker actually has at this very moment in the fight. The red section of the red zone is completely off limits to Pernell. As you saw, when Chavez closed the distance, Chavez stepped his lead foot over to the outside, and this effectively cut off that angle. Pernell Whitaker has the option of circling to his left, which is what the blue arrow is suggesting. But you have to understand that would open him up to Chavez's straight right hand, and Chavez had a very, very good right hand. We all know Chavez could crack. The other thing is Pernell could stay in the same location, but then that opens him up to a left hook to the body and then left hook over the top. The final thing that Pernell Whitaker can do is he can step back and create distance between himself and Chavez. And so we're going to see what decision does Pernell Whitaker make. And so of course we see him step back. Now Pernell Whitaker does decide to take a step back. This is the safest option. But let's not forget that by stepping back, Pernell Whitaker effectively gives up even more of the ring to Julio César Chávez. And Chavez is therefore showing you how he's able to apply pressure to his opponents to make them do what he wants them to do. Please make sure you click the red button to subscribe to my channel if you already haven't. Then check out some of my previous videos, or you could check out one of my more popular videos right now. Or you could do absolutely nothing and go out to the outro music.
Run in the crib, max out, put your face down. Or forced to shooting, click clack, shooting them rulers. Stretch out like rulers. Try me on forced to shooting. They savage life and they ruthless. Click clack, shooting them rulers.